Britney Spears, one of the most recognizable names in the history of American pop music, has entered a rehabilitation facility following her arrest last month on suspicion of driving under the influence of alcohol and drugs. Her representative confirmed the news to multiple United States media outlets on Sunday, stating that the 44-year-old singer voluntarily checked herself into a treatment center. The move comes roughly 5 weeks after an incident on a California motorway that put her name back in headlines around the world. But what exactly happened on that road in March, and what does this latest development mean for her legal situation? California. Highway Patrol reported that on the 4th of March, authorities were notified about a BMW being driven erratically at a high rate of speed on a motorway. When officers pulled the vehicle over, they found Britney Spears behind the wheel. According to the patrol, she showed signs of impairment and was subsequently subjected to a series of field sobriety tests. She was then arrested on suspicion of driving under the influence of alcohol and drugs. Her representative did not mince words in the immediate aftermath, calling the incident completely inexcusable. That statement, direct and unambiguous, signaled that those closest to her were not going to attempt to soften or spin what had happened. In the days that followed, the conversation shifted quickly from the arrest itself to what would come next for Spears. Her representative told the BBC that Britney intended to take the right steps and comply with the law, describing the arrest as potentially the first step in what was called long overdue change that needs to occur in her life. The language was striking, not defensive. It was an acknowledgement that something deeper was going on, something that a single court date alone could not resolve. So what was actually being put in place behind the scenes while the public waited for more information? According to statements made at the time, her loved ones were working to develop a plan to set her up for success and well-being. Her sons were said to be spending time with her, and family support was being mobilized. This week, that plan took its most concrete form yet, with her entry into a treatment facility. The timing is significant. She is scheduled to appear in a California court in approximately 3 weeks to face the DUI charge, and entering rehab voluntarily before that court date is a move that legal observers often note carries weight with judges evaluating the seriousness with which a defendant is addressing the conduct that led to charges. For many Americans, especially those who have followed the entertainment world across the past 3 decades, the name Britney Spears carries enormous weight. She first broke into the mainstream in 1998 with the single Baby One More Time, a song that became one of the best-selling debut singles in music history. What followed was a run of commercial success that placed her among the most successful pop artists of all time. Toxic, Stronger, Every Time, Gimme More, Womanizer, and dozens of other tracks defined the soundtrack of a generation. At her peak, she was one of the most photographed and written about people on the planet. But her story has never been only about music. What has defined the latter half of her public life is something far more complicated than any chart position. From 2008 until November of 2021, Spears lived under a legal arrangement known as a conservatorship. For many people hearing that term, for the first time it raises an immediate question. What exactly is a conservatorship, and how did one of the world's most famous entertainers end up under one for 13 years? A conservatorship, sometimes called a legal guardianship depending on the jurisdiction, is a court-ordered arrangement in which a designated person or persons takes legal control over the financial and personal affairs of an individual deemed unable to manage those affairs independently. It is a measure typically associated with elderly individuals suffering from severe cognitive decline or people with profound disabilities. In Spears's case, the conservatorship was established in 2008 following a period of very public personal crisis that included hospitalizations and what her father, Jamie Spears, later described as a life that was in shambles. He stated that she was in physical, emotional, mental, and financial distress at the time the arrangement was put in place, and that the conservatorship was a necessary intervention to bring stability back to her life. Jamie Spears served as a primary conservator over his daughter's estate, and for periods of time her personal life as well. He has maintained that the arrangement served its intended purpose and that through the conservatorship, Britney was able to return to a path towards stability. He stated publicly that the mission had been successful and that it was time for Britney to retake control of her life. That statement came as the conservatorship was drawing to a close. But what had happened in between those years to bring the entire situation to a boiling point, and why did it become a global cause? Beginning around 2020, a movement known broadly as Free Britney gained substantial public momentum. Fans and advocates argued that the conservatorship had extended far beyond what was necessary and that Spears was being denied basic rights and autonomy over her own existence. In June of 2021, Spears addressed a court directly, making a statement that was emotional, detailed, and widely reported. She described the conservatorship as abusive and stated that she wanted it to end. The public response was enormous. Legal analysts, celebrities, and ordinary people across the country weighed in on what her testimony revealed about the conservatorship system more broadly. By November 2021, a California judge terminated the arrangement, restoring her legal independence after 13 years. That restoration of freedom was greeted as a major moment, both for Spears personally and for the broader conversation about conservatorship law in the United States. And yet the years that followed raised their own set of concerns. In 2023, Spears published a memoir that detailed her experiences and generated significant media attention. Throughout 2023 and 2024, she made headlines for various reasons unrelated to music. Her name remained in circulation, but not always, in ways that suggested the clean break from turbulence that many had hoped the end of the conservatorship would bring. Which brings us to where things stood on the 4th of March of this year, when a California Highway Patrol officer pulled over a BMW on a motorway and found a 44-year-old woman at the wheel showing signs of impairment. The decision to enter rehab voluntarily, reported this past Sunday, represents a different kind of moment. It is not a court order, it is not a conservatorship. It is a choice made by Spears and the people around her to seek treatment before the legal process compels anything. That distinction matters, particularly given her history. For over a decade, her choices were made for her, or at minimum, heavily supervised by others. The fact that her representative is framing this as a voluntary decision carries its own significance. Whether that framing fully reflects the complexity of the pressures she is facing, legal, personal, and public, is a question only she can answer. But the direction of the decision toward treatment rather than avoidance is one that her family and representatives are publicly endorsing. Her sons, whose identities and lives have been carefully guarded in recent years, are said to be involved in providing support during this period. Spears has 2 sons from her marriage to Kevin Federline, which ended in 2007. The relationship between Spears and her children has had its own complicated chapter, with custody arrangements and reported estrangement making news over the years. Their presence and participation in her current support system, if accurate, is a detail her representatives chose to emphasize, and it is not a detail that would be included casually. It suggests that the people closest to her are taking this moment seriously. The court date in California remains on the calendar for approximately 3 weeks from now. What happens at that proceeding will depend on a number of factors, including how her entry into rehabilitation is viewed by prosecutors and the presiding judge. DUI cases in California carry a range of potential outcomes depending on the specifics of the incident, the defendant's history, and the steps taken afterward. Voluntarily seeking treatment prior to a court appearance is generally viewed as a mitigating factor, though it does not guarantee any particular legal outcome. Spears has no prior DUI convictions on public record, which is also a relevant consideration. What this moment represents in the longer arc of Britney Spears' life is difficult to assess from the outside. She has been a public figure since she was a teenager. She has been celebrated, scrutinized, controlled, defended, and debated by millions of people who have never met her. She has navigated a legal system that at times appeared to work against her basic autonomy, and she has survived chapters of her life that would have been overwhelming for almost anyone. Whether the current chapter marks a genuine turning point or simply another difficult passage remains to be seen. What is clear is that she is 44 years old, facing a legal charge, and has chosen, at least by the account of those speaking on her behalf, to address what is happening in her life before a court requires her to answer for it. For now, that is where things stand.